I have clicked start recording, so there we go. I'm gonna fade and head backstage.
Thanks, Bobby.
Shall we begin?
Sure.
All righty. Welcome to an evening with Nikky Finney. We are glad you're here. I'm Mary Kennedy, Director of the Wingate Museum of Art, current home of the exhibition Southbound, Photographs of and About the New South. We are delighted to be co-sponsoring this evening with our partners at the Murphy Hendricks Foundation. Southbound is the largest exhibition of its kind, with 220 photographs by 56 divergent photographers, all depicting what the New South means to them. We hope you'll visit the museum between now and December 3rd to see this historic exhibition. The museum is free and open to all, and our hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 12 to 5 p.m. For more information about all of our exhibitions and programs, please visit wingatemuseum.org. Again, thank you for being with us tonight. I'm now going to turn things over to my good friend and director of the Hendricks Murphy Foundation Programs in Literature and Language, Hope Coulter.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome everybody. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I'm glad to see all of you here, and especially glad to have our honored guest, Nikky Finney. We've really been looking forward to this event, and we've had the weeks leading up to it to begin to get familiar with these photographs and think about them and ponder them and write in response to them. So it's been very exciting. We've had a great day today with Professor Finney meeting with classes and individual groups of students and conducting a write shop. So it's been really, really wonderful. Let me remind you tonight to please turn off your cameras and mute your mics during the program itself, and then maybe during the Q&A period, you can turn your cameras back on and have more of an interaction with Professor Finney. But the tech people tell me that will give us the best bandwidth and the best resolution and so forth for her image to be front and center. So I'm sure you all are aware of Nikky Finney's acclaim, and that's one reason you're here tonight. You're familiar with her books, such as Head Off and Split, the National Book Award winner of 2011, On Wings Made of Gauze, Rice, The World is Round, and this book, which I've been enjoying, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry. She is a native of South Carolina, and I will tell you about her background in her own words. So from this book, she says, I was a Black girl who grew up in the human heat of the South in the 1960s. I was born 1 year after the Vietnam War began and went off to college the year it ended. I was raised in a world of war and conflict, and also kind and thoughtful, generous and committed, durable and determined people. The names of the people who had the greatest impact on me seemed to never make the headlines, but were always my well-lit path. My mother steeped us in the stories of Black history, and my father named me Love Child in order not to give anyone else the opportunity to distract me from what I had come to Earth to be. So be she. And we are glad that she bees with us tonight. So thank you so much, Professor Finney. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Wow, it has been a long day, but I mean that with all my heart. I want to thank a few people. Julia, your teaching and your students set the tone of the day, and I've been carrying them with me all day. And I didn't realize the museum was so new. So Sarah, thank you so much for all of the planning that has gone into this, and thank the students for trickling in all day long, and not being too shy to say something to me. It's been a great reward for me as a poet and a person who loves to teach and especially loves conversations. So I just want to say this to Hendricks, because I feel like liberal arts schools and small schools
Wait now, I'm on.
that that spend time and money and all kinds of things, reminding their students how important their hearts are, how important their humanity is. We can't applaud those schools enough in this time of tech and business and all those kinds of things. So I just want to give a bow to all the people and the resources who made this day possible. And I got a great sense of who you are and what you care about. So thank you for everything that you've done to make me feel so welcome. I'm going to read a few poems, but I want you to know right now, I love to be in the conversation with who has been listening or who was listening or who felt something and wanted to share that with me. I love that part of being a poet. Like that notion that the writer works in some exclusive place where he or she or they are not involved in humankind is, I don't like that. I do work in this room and create things, but then I'm so anxious and I feel a great need to leave and go out and be in the world with my mask on and have some conversations because I miss people. So I want that part to happen before I leave tonight. So I'll be wondering what you heard. This is what I call my first film. I love cinema, I love filmmaking, and I love, as the students who are with me today heard, I love the visual. And so I want you to see this moment that I write in The World is Round, where I'm at my grandparents' farm. It's the end of the day. I'm 6 years old and I'm falling asleep and I'm staring at the wall and I'm watching all the things that happened to me on that day flicker in my mind. And I got this idea for this poem from a black and white photograph of my family, my father, my mother, my oldest brother, and me in bed, in the only other bed that's in my grandparents' house. And we were very tightly packed in that bed. And I thought about what I must have been thinking about as a young poet child. We are four to a bed, so close our hips must come with hinges. A ticking of brown family thrown across the cotton and feather mattress of winter. Tucked deep inside the house, my grandfather raised up from the red earth straight into the woolly air. The black and white photograph isn't supposed to predict the future, but my mother looks like my unborn brother. And even at 3, I am different. My tiny black girl eyes are a queer shade of green. At 5, my older brother stands there on the inn, already buttoned into my father's sense of place. We are so close in this cherry bed. Our lightly touching hips must surely be hinged. Even the children have them. Daddy has moved into place next to Mama. Mama has moved in next to me. I am the only one awake, the only one with a wall. The whole house has fallen. The movie begins. And one of the things I love about this poem, you can't see it if you're not looking at it, but there's no punctuation. They're just pauses or caesuras that break up those images that you saw, almost like a flicker of a camera or a photograph. I was in Philadelphia, Julia, and I was reading from a book, and everybody was in the audience as it was in the old days. I call it the old days, in the old country when we used to gather in that way. And a woman came in and she was standing at the back of the room and she wouldn't take off her coat. It was snowing. It was one of those Philadelphia snowy nights. And she just stood there until I was finished. And then she came up front after everybody had gotten their book signed. And she looked at me and she said, the epigraph that starts this poem, she said, "You write like a Black woman who's never been hit before. I read poetry in Philly for the first time ever. She started walking up all the way from in back of the room. From against the wall she came. Big coat, boots, eyes soft as candles and two storms blowing. Something she could not see from way back there, but could clearly hear in my voice. Something she needed to know before pouring herself back out into the icy city night. She came close to get a good look, to ask me something she found in a strange way missing from my Black woman poetry. Sidestepping the crowd, ignoring the book signing line, she stood there waiting for everyone to go, waiting like some kind of representative. And when it was just the two of us, she stepped into the shoes of her words. Hey, she said, you write real soft, spell it out kind, no bullet holes, no open wounds in your words. How do you do that? Write like you've never been hit before. I could hardly speak, all my breath held ransom by her question. I looked at her and believed there was a train on pause somewhere, maybe just outside the back door where she had stood listening. Was it a train with boxcars that she was escorting somewhere when she heard about the reading? A train with boxcars carrying broken women's bodies, their carved up legs and bullet-riddled stomachs, momentarily on pause from moving cross country. Women's bodies, brown, black, and blue, laying right where coal, cars, and cattle usually do. She needed my answer for herself and for them too. Hey, she said, we were just wondering how you made it through, and we didn't. I shook my head. I had never thought about having never been hit and what it might have made me sound like. You know how many times I've been stabbed? She asked me. She raised her blouse all the way above her breasts, the cuts on her resembling some kind of grotesque wallpaper. How many women are there like you? She asked me. Then I knew for sure. She had been sent in from the Philly coal by the others on the train to listen, stand up close, make me out as best she could. She put my hand over top hers, asked could we stand up straight back, measure out our differences right there and then. She gathered it all up, wrote down the things she could, remembered the rest to the trainload of us waiting out back for answers. Full to the brim, with every age of woman, every neighborhood of woman whose name had already been forgotten. The train blew its whistle. She started to hurry. I moved towards her and we stood back to back, her hand grazing the top of our heads, my hand measuring out our same widths, each of us recognizing the brown woman latitudes, the Black woman longitudes in the other. I turned around and held up my shirt and brought my smooth belly into her scarred one, our navels pressing, marking out some kind of new equatorial lines. There are some poems that you don't have to imagine because they happen right before you. And that poem happened right before me. And I kind of ran to the hotel. I couldn't stop for some reason. And then I just scribbled it down because I wanted to capture that moment that I thought was just pristine and incredibly humbling for her to be so honest with me. This, let's see, what should I read? I never sort of decide before I start to read. I kind of, the poem says to me, stop, I want to be heard tonight. So that's what I'll do. The book the last book that came out last year, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry. I love the part that Sarah read because it's so true. My father would say to me, he called me, his name for me was Love Child. And I never understood it until much later in life. And he said, I just want you to know how deeply you are loved. And I don't want you to believe other people when they call you other names, that that's not your name. You have a name, and you also have a private name from me. And I thought it was a very powerful thing for him to sort of give me that understanding so early. So this is one of the ekphrastic poems that we were talking about today that's in the exhibit that you can find online, called Little Man Standing in Clover. And if you haven't seen this picture, as a little brown-skinned boy that when I saw it, standing in a field of clover with his shirt off, with his jeans on, and with, you got to see this in the exhibit if it's there, and his belt buckle, like a man's belt buckle. I was like, look at him, he's a little man standing in clover. So I was immediately drawn to it. His name is Devonte Hayes, and it was a photograph taken by Titus Brooks Higgins. And I didn't know what I would say until I started to write, and then the whole scene just kind of unfolded. And I am in his voice talking to whoever is looking at him. Little man standing in clover. I come here to think, not smile. That prefer turf where I am taller than the clover. Green is my daddy's favorite color. Daddy's 72 Eldorado is green. Everything I like to think about was born before me. I want to be a man like my daddy. Great granddaddy takes his shirt off in the sun too. Cut that. He says it will take time and luck for me to be a man. And that's when mama yells out from where we didn't know she was listening. Prayer. I never come here to think about my belt locked and loaded. Cut that. A man needs his belt when he comes from these parts. Snakes hide out. Ain't scared of no snake. Cut that. I got something for a snake. Wanna see? Daddy says a man should keep his chest out in the sun as much as he can so his six-pack will grow and his eyes won't run. Daddy says a man needs one good belt, and if it's the right one, he can wear it to church on Sunday, then to work on Monday, and nobody can tell the difference. Cut that. Smiling is for Cabbage Patches and girls in tops. I was being interviewed by one of my students once, and he was like, Professor Finney, oh, you have such a sense of humor. And I was like, sense of humor? What are you talking about? I don't have a sense of humor. And right when I finished reading this poem, every time I read this poem, I just giggle because I have entered the body of this, I don't know, 4-year-old and imagine what his voice sounds like. I'd love to know who he is and you know, what he really does sound like. We can talk about that when we get to the Q&A. This book has these things in it that I imagined into what I call hotbeds. I'm a gardener. I'm always outside with my hands in the dirt and the soil trying to grow my peonies, but that's hard. But I'm growing some other things now. But one of the things that in this book are moments out of my journal. I love journaling. I keep a journal every day. And the poems that become poems start in a garden-like setting in my journal books that I name hotbeds. So this is, when I say I'm reading hotbed and there's a number, these are actually not so much poems, but where the poem comes from. Hotbed 49. It's hunting season. and I'm driving Highway 26 across the Congaree River. One exit remains before my exit home. A man is coming toward me riding against the traffic. He is a man who should not be riding his bicycle in the emergency lane of this dangerous highway, but he is. He rides fast as if he is being chased, but no one is behind him. He rides fast as if he knows he only has a small window of time. He is holding on to the wobbling bike handles with only his right hand. The front legs of a 10-point buck are curled around his right shoulder. The buck's 10-point antlers, his half-closed eyes, open gapping mouth, and dangling tongue are held near the bicyclist's dark brown cheek. His left arm is locked in place. I slow down as he passes by to be sure I am seeing what I am seeing. A black man on a bright orange bike on a 4-laner with a dead deer splayed across his shoulders like a mink collar. There is blood dripping down his white shirt, but his smile is as wide as the Congaree River. His fast pedaling legs tell me this winter will be different for him. This winter, in his shotgun of a house, there will be meat. Again, I can't explain seeing this guy on the bridge. I'm just driving, I'm trying to get to work, and there's this guy on a bike with a huge deer on his shoulder. And I almost have an accident trying to get my pencil to take down the notes of what I see. And I have to take the next exit and just scribble. But I don't know. Poets can't look away from such things as this. I'm gonna read 2 more poems and then I just want to talk. I'd love to know what you hear, what you're hearing. So this is Hotbed 85, and it's about my dad, who I adore, who I was so close with, died in 2017 of Alzheimer's. And I moved home from Kentucky to South Carolina to take care of him with my mom. And this was a visit we made to the hospital because they said he needed a swallowing test so that he wouldn't get pneumonia. Hotbed 85. His ability to swallow has left Earth. Mama and I are squeezed inside one chair meant for 2 inside a tiny room behind the swallowing monitor on the 3rd floor of the hospital. We are being saved from the radiation being used in order to look inside Daddy's throat. A monitor in front of us allows us to see the test as it happens. His swallowing has gotten more difficult these last several weeks. We are here to witness the great swallowing test that will tell all. It is the test that can save him from pneumonia, but also take away the last human pleasure his body will ever know. The test is divided into applesauce, Jell-O, honey, a cracker, a sip of water. Daddy doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't know any of the strangers who are trying to help him. I can feel him feeling lost. The top of my father's spine suddenly pops into the screen. My mother gasps as if she has never seen him this naked. I am watching the full anatomy of Daddy's throat unfold like a movie on the monitor. It is like watching a puppet show. There are so many tiny marionette strings involved. Swallowing has a rhythm and is a production. There is a stage right and a stage left. One action releases another action. They want to see if the foods he regularly eats are going down and landing where they should. My eye is on the Jell-O, waiting at the top of his tongue like an Olympic diver on the high board. He looks around the room for anything familiar. I wave so he will know he is not alone. He waves back when he sees me. I whisper, "Swallow, Daddy, swallow." I touch my own throat and make a swallowing motion to try and translate what my words don't seem to be relaying. But the squared red diver on the high board has forgotten all his training. He has forgotten how to tuck and roll his legs, how to leap into the precious air of the esophagus. This last poem, it's amazing where poems are waiting for you. When you wake up and you brush your teeth and you go out into the world, you really don't know where they're going to be waiting. In 2015, Dylan Roof took a gun into Mother Emanuel Church and massacred 9 of its members who were in a prayer meeting in Bible school. And I knew I wanted to write something about that moment, but I didn't know what. And I didn't want to write what was happening on the news. I wanted to write something else. I don't need to write what CNN tells you. I need to come through. I always say I want to come through a window and not a door. A door is obvious. You open the door, people come through, the poem comes through. But I love coming through a window. I love the surprise of what I might see if I look through a window at the same thing. It's a different angle, a different perspective. We talked a little bit about that today in class. It's like what perspective you have. So I was walking through the room 2 years after this murder happened, and there was the Miss Polly, who was the only survivor of that moment, on the witness stand giving her testimony. And she said one thing, and I knew the poem would be centered right there. She said, Dylan Roof asked her, after he had shot everybody else, he asked Miss Polly, "Have I shot you yet?" And this is the scene. But I knew the poem would be centered there in that incredible question. Miss Polly is akimbo underneath the Mother Emanuel collection table. The one who came to start the next Civil War speaks to her directly. Have I shot you yet? There is no one else left to answer. In the church basement, all are dead or bleeding out. Miss Polly, half on her knees, is askew, tilted, her last angle. Akimbo to the 9 others who are sprawled and already spiraling toward heaven. In her mind, she too is about to die. There is no place to hide when you are the last one facing the waving gun. The air has been invaded by a poison mix of bright red ore spewing from his mouth. There was a spilling. There is about to be another. He cannot see the seeping septic colors, but she can. And there is no isthmus wide enough beneath her shield of a table to keep her from the current of his non-stop debris. A floating band of iron orange tincture crooks her pounding heart, but does not push her downstream. She waits sideways, as high up as she can, refusing to look at him. She knows how evil can enter through the iris if beheld too long. She will not be all black and blue, unsure of what has been released in the room. A river of flaming copper is moving slowly through her blood. She is an honest woman and has seen with her own two honest woman eyes what hate erupting inside a man can do and what this one has done. She decides her last words on this earth will not be camouflaged and khaki, handed over just before he runs out the same way he walked in. When he shot the pastor, she could have faked it, fallen over sideways, held herself perfectly still, asked her body to lie for her, but that would not have been the life she has lived. It will not be the death she dies at his feet. So she turns into the last one standing, and her molten answer arrives. It is the color of pounded beets beaten out of their safe skins. Her persimmon words outline every bullet, beloved, riddled body still lying on the floor. She says, "No, you have not." The ekphrastic exercise, the reason that I wrote this poem beyond that moment with Miss Polly is because of Daniel Beltra's picture of an oil spill. And I wondered, could I make the leap as a poet from this oil spill, right? All this oil in the Gulf of Mexico, orange, red tincture, that's what you heard in the poem, but also to an image of Mother Emanuel, that room where those beloved church members were killed. And I felt this was the image that must accompany. I mean, the poem was written after I saw this. I mean, I was thinking about it, but when I saw this, I was like, now I know what I want to say. And we can talk about a little bit of that in Q&A, but, and how strange, you know, in a poet's mind, how things that seem disparate and different can come together to make something whole. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here, and thank Hendrix College again, and the museum, and all the students who welcomed me and were just brilliant and warm and incredibly passionate and caring, and it was just nice to be reminded of our young people and this generation having that kind of presence in the world. So thank you so much. I see these little circles on the page. I see some initials. It's so hard not to be live. I miss it so much.
So if anyone has questions or comments, Professor Finney can field them yourself, or you can ask people to put them in the chat, or whatever you would like to do.
I'm afraid if I hit a button, it's gonna all go away. So you better do it.
Okay. Anyone with a question, just go for it, however you like.
Or comment or anything.
Let's see. I see
So
a hand. Right.
Hi there. Thank you so much for coming. That was so lovely to get to hear the poetry coming from you as the poet. I'm an aspiring writer, and I'm really interested in, anytime I get the opportunity to talk to someone who's made a career in writing, about kind of their process of how you approach a piece of creative work. I feel like sometimes when I have like a scene, like you kind of described, where it's like the work is just kind of coming out of you, I can't organize all of the thoughts that I might have, or decide when something is really pertinent to the work I'm working on. How do you kind of make those tough choices about what goes in the final poem, what stays and what goes from the scene?
Great question, Sophie. Great question. First of all, I want to say, if you give yourself an out to be something else, like my dad kept trying to get me to go to law school. If I had said, okay, all right, I'm going to try this for a little while, and then I'm going to go to law school, then I might as well just go to law school, because I'm not all in. So the first thing you got to say is, you got to be all in to being a writer. It's not easy. It's very tough. There are no guarantees, but I didn't want to be anything else except a writer and a poet. And I feel like that sort of all-in attitude really helped me. That's one thing. Secondly, the writer James Baldwin taught me so much by just reading his books, reading his essays, and listening to him talk about being a writer. This is what he taught me about the process you're talking about. He said, a writer has to make 40,000 decisions for every one thing they create. What? 40,000. Of course, it may be 29, it may be 30, it may be 60. But what he taught me was that I wasn't a person who was really comfortable making decisions that often, that fast, like that. I had to change my notion of understanding about making decisions. Really, really, really important. Because if you say the person is left-handed that you're writing about, they're going to stay left-handed. And that left-handedness means something, right? So every decision you make makes another decision come forward. So you got to make decisions as a writer. When I saw that oil spill, I was like, that's the way in. I'm not going to get talked out of it. I don't want anybody to tell me it's too abstract, or I got to write into that. So being not sure where you're going, because I wasn't sure where I'm going. I was really sure about the feeling that I had about writing about Miss Polly and the oil spill all in one breath. So I remember being all in my head and all around, and oh no, let's make it Spain. No, let's make it East Florida. No, make a decision. When you make that one decision, other things will be in place. And you have to organize your thoughts in some sort of way, or the thing that you're writing about in some sort of way, so you can ask yourself the following questions about how you're writing. Are my verbs helping? Do I know where my verbs are? Are my adjectives helping? We looked at a poem this morning in Julia's class, and the students just got it. They saw where the power in the writing was, and you could look at it and see how that writer, Chase Twitchell, organized that poem. And it just falls, it opens. And then the end, we looked at an essay on the hummingbird, and the students were kind of amazed that they were suspended at the end of that essay. There was no denouement. There was no carefully tied ending. They were just like hummingbirds floating in the air when they got to the end of that essay. So one of the things you have to do is make sure you're making decisions and you're not uncomfortable making decisions. Because I was really uncomfortable making decisions about writing when I was in my 20s, and I had to change that. It's a really important thing to do. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much. That was really powerful. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie Stewart.
Hi. I had a question. about kind of your process. Do you like seek out criticism, or like how do you handle criticism about your work?
Ooh, really important. So when you're writing something that means so much to you, right? You have to be careful about who you give it to. If you're in a class and you're working on something, there's always the teacher, right? There's always your classmates. Never give it to your mom for advice. Never give it to your family members unless they have some literary expertise. Sometimes we give our things to people that we care about, thinking that just because they love us or like us or put up with us, that they're going to give us some good information or some good reaction. That's not true. That's not true. So I think you have to be thoughtful about who you hand your work to, especially as it's blooming. It's not finished. You want to know if something's working, if the character makes sense, or the idea of the poem makes sense. That's a really tender time. So you want to give it to a peer, somebody in that writing group, maybe not to the whole group unless you're presenting work, that has a sensibility that might be aligned with you, but also bigger than that, would tell you the truth. You know how some people aren't going to tell you the truth? They're just going to say, oh, gosh, this is just the best thing. I didn't know you were right. You don't need that. You need to be growing. So when I'm in a workshop, I'm looking for the people who have strengths in areas I don't. So when I was in workshop and I was your age, I would say, wow, I want my punctuation to be stronger. I want my understanding of grammar. So anybody who started talking about commas or semicolons or that kind of thing, I was all ears. It's not that shouldn't be any competition with that person. You're trying to get information that helps you become a better writer. I would not hand it off. So many young people are sending their work off online to sources, to people who you don't know, I think that's very dangerous. I know we're online, in a lot of ways in our lives now, but I think you need to nurture something. I mean, Hendrix is a perfect place to have, and maybe you already have this, a small writing workshop. No more than 7, 8 people. No more than that. If you have more than that, it's going to be everybody's ego is going to drive. Oh, I've got something new. Find 5 people who share the same seriousness about writing that you do. Close it down. Meet when you can, share a little bit of work, grow together, take each other seriously. Hendrix is perfect for that kind of writing workshop if you don't have that now. Outside of class, not for a grade, just for you guys. I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Savannah?
Hi, I just wanted to thank you again for reading your poetry. You're an amazing poet, and it was a very lovely experience, and it almost made me cry. I'm not being hyperbolic.
No.
I wanted to hear you talk more about your hotbeds. I think that's such an interesting concept, especially because you keep talking about growing and growth as writers, and I also love plants. It's a little bit of a selfish question.
Okay, Savannah, you must, it's not selfish. It's like curiosity. It's like, if you don't ask the question that you need answered, who's going to ask it? I don't want you to think of that as selfish. I want you to think of that as hungry. You're hungry to know that answer. I realized that in my journals, there were so many verdant, lush things that just happened as a result of my witnessing, like the man on the bike with the deer. This human moment where this man, someone had shot a deer, and he had, or the deer had been hit by a car, right? And he saw meals for a sustained period of time. He was so joyous. And I was like, who cares about this but me? And I said, oh, somebody will care about this if I write it right, if I hold it close, if I show his humanity, if I show the danger he was in on that highway on that bike, but how happy he was because he took the first exit and went home. You know, like we need more stories about how we survive a poverty or not having enough food or that kind of thing, and moments of ecstasy in that sort of simple way. So I looked in my journals and I saw all these moments and I thought, I have to call these something because they're just narrative blocks of, of time. My father's swallowing test, the man on the bridge. There's another one where I saw a bat on, I'm a walker. So I noticed things and I pick up things out in the world, and the bat was moving, but I was like, that bat is dead. And of course, I said, this line came to me where I said, death also has a ticking sound, because once the body cavity is invaded by, all those organisms, it was moving like it was alive. And I was curious to see if I could write something about that. So I have about, I would say 40 hotbeds in this book. And I love that I chose that word for them, hotbed, i.e. gardening, a place where you put light and fertilizer and make something grow. It just seemed like a perfect way to call, a perfect thing to call those moments in my journals. And these have been worked. These aren't like simply plucked, from, I don't write that well first, like first blush. So they have some work on them, but I liked calling them hotbeds and not having to name them and numbering them. And I like creating new forms. I think that's a part of being a writer and being comfortable in yourself with all the things you've already done, and then imagining, maybe I'll just write some hotbeds and see how they go. And these have been really popular with readers and being online. People really like the idea. So thank you for asking about them. I think there's a question from Elisha.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I really loved your reading of your poems. I was wondering how you work to get your voice into your poems.
I really want you to listen. Anyone who wants to write stories, poems, novels, novellas, plays, I want you to hear this answer. It's so important. I feel like the world tells young writers, including me a long time ago, that we want you to sound like somebody else. We want you to sound like Herman Melville or Toni Morrison or Faulkner, or we celebrate those writers. But we don't talk enough about, with young writers, how to get your voice up from your belly into your throat, into your hands, on the page. I try to spend a lot of time with my young writers asking them, what do you care about? What are your obsessions? What do you know something about? What could you write about? I had a young 19-year-old who just swore he knew nothing. He had no obsessions. He didn't care about anything. And then one day, 3 rocks fell out of his backpack. I'll never forget this. 3 of the most beautiful tourmaline, quartz. What was the other one? Beautiful. And I'm a rock girl too. And I went, Brad, what is that? He said, oh, I collect rocks. And I said, You told me you didn't have any obsessions or interests or anything like that. Long story short, in the next month, Brad wrote the most beautiful short story about a young guy, who wanted to be a geologist, and what he loved about rocks and the colors and all that. Why am I telling you this story? Because I think we don't spend enough time asking you and telling you and applauding the little things that you might write about in brilliant, beautiful, big ways. That's all writing is. Melville being consumed by a whale. Faulkner being consumed by his hometown and all the characters in it. What do you care about? I care about injustice. I care about Black girls being seen as human beings in the world. I care about Mother Nature. I care about the ocean. I could make you a big list, and not in a shy way, and not in a I want you to care about what I care about kind of way. Elijah, I want you to ask yourself, what moves you? What would you spend your time on? What makes your heart pound? When you start answering those questions, then you realize what you will spend time writing. Only then. Until then, you're imitating somebody else. Somebody told you you have to write about New York City. Somebody tells you you have to write about whatever. What do you want to write about? What do you want to stand before an audience and say, this is what I care about? This is what I'm giving humanity. That's what those photographers in that exhibit are doing. They didn't know Southbound was going to happen. They didn't know they would be plucked into this 500 photograph moment. They were doing what they loved. I can't tell you, when someone calls me and says, would you come to my campus or would you come and do a reading? I always go, I'm just the luckiest girl in the world. I get to do what I love. I didn't want to go to law school. I love my father. That's not what I wanted to do with my life. I only get one life, I think. Find it, Elijah. It's out there. And then write into it. You guys have asked the best questions. You've just opened up your heart in the most genuine way. I cannot thank you enough. And I know some of you have some other things to say, and I appreciate you so much. I really do. So thank you for those great questions all day long.
Well, Nikky Finney, thank you. And you have opened your heart and been really generous with us and genuine. And I know that I'm going to see and read the resonance of your presence in a lot of student poems to come, yet to be written, and ones that maybe they started today. So I'm looking forward to continuing to reap the benefits as a teacher and a reader of poetry. I'll reap that for a while. But thank you so much for your time with us, and to our audience, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I hope you will please go to the survey that Sarah has put in the chat and let us know how this event was for you. Both the Wingate Museum of Art and the Hendrix Murphy Foundation appreciate that very much. So thanks again, everybody, and it's been a wonderful event. Thank you, Nikky Finney.
Thank you so much. Take good care of each other. It matters.
Round of applause.
Take good care.
Lots of praise going into the chat, so check that out before you exit. Many thank yous and compliments.